Okay, guys, so today we are going to be reading our next story. Technically, two stories, but all grouped into one document from the Odyssey. And those are titled Circe's Warning and the Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to go make sure that we understand what has happened so far, leading us up to this point. Some of you want to fast forward through this moment, it's just a recap, but I do think it'll help you in understanding what has happened so far in our Odyssey. And I will be also posting a recap like I always do on Instagram. First things first, please make sure you complete the warm-up. You need to be doing these every day. Please do not let this slip out of your mind. The completing warm-up number 6 in Google Classroom. Get that done and complete sentences as soon as possible. It should be the first thing you do. If you want to pause this video and do it now, please do it. Okay, so one thing I want you to remember, I talked to some of you on Zoom yesterday about the structure of the Odyssey. Remember, Odysseus is in King Alcinous' court of the Phaeacians, and he is telling this story to this court full of people about what he experienced on his journey home to Ithaca. Or on his journey home, he's not there yet. So he is telling the story of what happened to him. Remember, it's in first person. We have to consider the fact. Is he telling the truth? Is he giving us a forthright description of what happened? Or is he being kind of shady? Remember, he is telling us in first person, so he has full control over this story. Remember, land of lotus eaters, they ate the fruit. They had to stay there, or their bodies wanted to stay there because they were they forgot everything they wanted to do in life. They lost all their motivation. They just wanted to lay there and sleep and eat. Probably wasted away until they died. Remember, Odysseus brought them back onto the ship to get them going. Then they ran into good old Polyphemus in the land of the Cyclops. Polyphemus ate a bunch of his men. We see some of his men die in that story. And then Odysseus gets really cocky as he's leaving the island and results in Polyphemus putting this curse on him, this prayer to Poseidon saying, please do not let Odysseus have an easy journey home. And if he does get home, please make sure he faces hard times when he gets home, and that all of his men die, which we are going to see continue to happen in these stories. The next thing, we have this interaction with Aeolus. Aeolus gives them this bag of wind. The men open the bag of wind, and then it blows them back to Aeolus, who has no sympathy for them the second time around and sends them on their journey. That's when they run into the Laestrygonians. They destroy a bunch of the ships. The only ship left is Odysseus' ship, the one he is on. All of his other men are dead, and he only has this ship full of men left for his journey home. So a bunch of his men die in the land of the Laestrygonians. And we run into good old Circe, sorceress goddess. We're going to see her a little bit later when we come back to her island. But they're on her island. Remember, Elpenor dies because he gets too drunk and climbs up to the roof. But she tells them after a year of staying there that they need to go to the land of the dead, talk to Tiresias, who is going to give Odysseus this prophecy of what's going to happen to him on the rest of his journey. Then we go to the land of the dead. Tiresias appears to him, tells him everything that is going to happen. That Poseidon is angry at him, so he has to go through this little strait of land where he's going to have to deal with some monsters, which we'll see in today's story. And then he has to go to Thrinacia, island of the sun god Helios, and not touch the cattle. If he touches the cattle, all of his men will die. We might see that happen. And then after that is when he is going to end up on Calypso's island. Okay, so that is us caught up to where we are today. The first thing that happens is Odysseus ends up back on Circe's island. Remember, Elpenor predicted that it was going to happen. He was going to end up back there, and he needed to help bury Elpenor, give him this burial, and then build this monument for him. So he ends up back on good old Circe, sorceress goddess, her island. So we're going to pick up in the story. It is right under the title that says Circe's Warning on your text. And it has a little bit of a description before we get started in our first two columns. Okay, so let's follow along with me in the text. If you want to be annotating, please be annotating. Remember, that's going to help you on your essay that you are writing after this unit. So, Circe's warning. Odysseus and his men return to Circe's island, where Circe warns Odysseus of the perils that await him. In the following passage, Odysseus, quoting Circe, is still speaking at Alcinous' court. Remember, he is telling this story now. He is going to tell them what Circe said to him. So he makes it back to Circe's island. Now Circe is also going to give him basically a prophecy. So we're going to talk about one of the worksheets you're filling out after this video is actually a comparison between the warning that Tiresias gives him and the one that Circe gives him and how those are different. So right now, this is Circe talking to Odysseus. Listen with care to this now, and a god will arm your mind. I want you to focus on this phrase, arm your mind. That's going to come up. What it means to arm your mind does not mean to wrap an arm around your mind. Does not mean to pull out a gun. It just means to strengthen your mind so that you can face any kind of obstacle. Square in your ship's path are sirens. crying beauty to bewitch men coasting by. Woe to the innocent who hears that sound. So she points out the first monster that Odysseus is going to have to deal with. Odysseus is going to deal with a bunch of monsters in this scene. So she's saying you're going to have to deal with the Sirens. They're crying beauty to bewitch men. Bewitch means put men under the spell. So if men hear the Siren's song, then something bad is going to happen to them. He will not see his lady nor his children in joy, crowding about him home from sea. The Sirens will sing his mind away, on their sweet meadow lolling. There are bones of dead men rotting in a pile beside them, and flayed skins shrivel around the spot. Steer wide, keep well to the seaward, plug your oarsmen's ears with beeswax kneaded soft. None of the rest should hear that song. So what she is saying, she said, you're going to pass the Sirens Island, they are going to start singing, and if your men listen to the song, they will jump into the ocean, swim to this island, and they will just lay there, listening to the sirens sing until they literally waste away and die. So your men will die if they listen and they get entrapped by the sirens. And they said if you look at their island, there are bones everywhere of just men that have done that same thing. So she's saying no one should hear that song. But if you wish to listen, let the men tie you to the lugger, hand and foot, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, so you may hear those harpies' thrilling voices. I want you to notice the fact that she calls them harpies. What a harpy is a part bird, part female, woman, kind of creature. So I'm going to show you some pictures in just a minute of what the sirens might look like once we actually face them. But they are this representation of this half human, half bird kind of creature. Shout as you will, begging to be untied, your crew must only twist more line around you and keep their stroke up till the singers fade. So what Circe is saying here, she's saying that if you want to listen, Odysseus, if you want to hear the siren song, your men have to tie you up around the mast after you've put beeswax in their ear so they can't hear it. And anytime you're begging to let go, begging to go to this island, because that's what the song makes you do, it makes you really want to go listen to them more, then your men just have to tie you up even more and keep you on the boat. We have to consider, why would Odysseus might want to do this? Why would he want to listen to this song? Keep in mind that, remember, he's telling this story. Now he's telling the story to the court. Doesn't he seem really impressive, given the fact that he was able to listen to the siren song and survive? So maybe he was doing this because he wanted something to brag about. The next peril lies between two headlands. Two headlands means like two pieces of islands. So I want you to picture there's just a narrow strip of water, and there's two islands next to them, mountainous islands, and there's going to be monsters on either side. And so there's two headlands, and then there's this narrow strip of water. Remember, that's the narrow strip of water Tiresias mentioned that they will have to go through to avoid Poseidon. That is the den of Scylla, where she yaps abdominally a newborn whelp's cry, though she is huge and monstrous. God or man, no one could look on her in joy. Her legs, and there are 12 of them, are like great tentacles, unjointed, and upon her serpent neck are borne 6 heads, like nightmares of ferocity, with triple serrated roads of fangs and deep gullets of black death. So, what she's warning against Scylla. Scylla is this huge monster. It has 6 heads and 12 legs, and is up on this mountain. I want you to picture it like at the top of a mountain looking over the strait. So as ships come through this narrow strip, her heads reach down and grab men. So Circe is warning him against this monster. Half her length, she sways her heads in the air outside the horrid cleft, hunting the sea around that area for dolphins, dogfish, or what bigger game thundering feeds in thousands. And no ship's company can claim to have passed her without loss and grief. She takes from every ship 1 man for every gullet. If you don't know what a gullet is, it's basically like a throat. So she has 6 heads, she has 6 gullets, so she takes 1 man for every gullet. So she takes 6 men from every ship that pass. So when Odysseus passes this, if he goes close to Scylla, 6 of his men are going to die. Keep that in mind. The opposite point seems more a tongue of land you touch with a good bow shot at the narrows. A great wild fig, a shaggy mass of leaves grow on it, and Charybdis lurks below to swallow down the dark sea tide. 3 times from dawn to dusk she spews it up and sucks it down again 3 times, a whirling maelstrom. If you come upon her, then the god who makes the earth tremble could not save you. So the other monster is basically like this whirlpool that is in the water. Her mouth opens, she sucks everything in and then spews it all out. So basically you'll die, you'll drown, and your ship will get destroyed if Charybdis sucks you into the water. She also has lines of teeth, serrated teeth, that once you come into it, like chews you up. So basically like a whirlpool, but with a bunch of razor sharp teeth. So both monsters, not very good. Now, I want you to remember, this is a narrow strip of land. Odysseus is going to have to choose to go between one or closer to one of the monsters. He can go close to Charybdis And whenever his ship gets sucked in, everyone dies and he loses the ship. Or if he goes next to Scylla, only 6 of his men die. So I want you to keep this kind of moral question that Odysseus now has to deal with in your mind. So Circe gives him a very concrete suggestion for what he needs to do. No, hug the cliff of Scylla. Take your ship through on a racing stroke. It's better to mourn 6 men than to lose them all, and the ship too. So she tells him, go by Scylla, lose 6 of your men, and move on. She's saying, just give up 6 so that not everyone dies and you don't lose your ship as well. Then you will coast Thrinacia, the island where Helios' cattle graze, fine herds and flocks of goodly sheep. The herds and flocks are 7, with 50 beasts in each. No lambs are dropped or calves, as these fat cattle never die. I want you to notice that. These fat cattle never die. So what she's saying is that these cows, this cattle that is on Helios' island are immortal cows. So they can never die. So please do not try to touch them. Now give those kine a wide berth. Keep your thoughts intent upon your course for home, and hard seafaring brings you all to Ithaca. But if you raid the beeves, if you raid the cows, I see a destruction for ship and crew. So what she's saying is that if you touch those cows, then you will die. She sees it. Now, this warning is very similar to the one that we see from Tiresias. Okay, so she is giving him this warning, very similar again, as to what he needs to do. But what we see during this suggestion, what we see from Circe here, is that she's giving him very concrete suggestions for what he needs to do. For Scylla, go by Scylla, sacrifice 6 of your men. For the cows, don't touch them at all. And then avoid Charybdis as much as you can. For the Sirens, let your man tie you up, let them put beeswax in their ears so they can't hear. So we're seeing Circe actually be pretty helpful here. She's pretty much setting these men up for what they need to do to be successful. Okay, so that is Circe's warning. That is the first part of this story. Now we're going to move on to the second part, which is the rest of it. The Ithacans set off. Odysseus does not tell his men of Circe's last prophecy, that he will be the only survivor of their long journey. Still speaking to Alcinous' court, Odysseus continues his tale. I want you to consider that fact. Odysseus does not tell his men that they are all going to die, probably. Why might he do this? Probably to keep his men fighting for him. If he tells them you're all going to die, maybe they'll be like, I don't really want to get back home to Ithaca anymore. I think I'm just going to settle here on Circe's island, live here peacefully. They're not going to try to help him. So he wants all of these men to give up their lives for him. He's asking them a lot, and he's not even telling them the full gist of what's going on. Okay, so now we're going to see him talking to his men, kind of giving them a pep talk, and see what he actually reveals to them. So the first monster that we're going to face is the Sirens. If you look at these images here, it is that representation of the part female, part bird. Some of them show that they actually kind of have a female body with just wings and then a bird face. Some of them are just full-on bird with the female face. Some of them are the female body with a bird face. It's all different representations. These are just 2 different forms of what the Sirens might look like. So we'll continue the story now with the bottom column. The crew being now silent before me, I addressed them sore at heart. Dear friends, more than 1 man or 2 should know these things that Circe foresaw for us and shared with me. So let me tell her forecast. Then we die with our eyes open if we are going to die, or know what death we baffle if we can. So what it means to die with your eyes open is that you know why you're dying. You know what is causing your death. So he's going to let his men in on what Circe said, so that when they die, if they die, we know they're probably going to die, that they know why they're dying, what's causing their death. Sirens weaving a haunting song over the sea we are to shun, she said, to ignore. Shun means ignore. And their green shore all sweet with clover. Yet she urged that I alone should listen to their song. Therefore you are to tie me up, tight as a splint, erect along the mast, lashed to the mast. And if I shout and beg to be untied, take more turns of the rope to muffle me. So he tells his men, I'm going to listen to the song. You need to tie me up while you guys keep rowing as we pass the Sirens, because I do want to hear their song. I rather dwelt on this part of the forecast while our good ship made time, bound outward down the wind for the strange island of the Sirens. So I want you to note here, he only warns his men about the Sirens. He does not warn them about Scylla and Charybdis. He leaves that part out, which is kind of shady of him. He probably should have let them know that they're probably, at least 6 of them are going to die from Scylla attacking them, if not all of them, when they deal with Charybdis. Then all at once the wind fell, and a calm came over the sea, as though some power lulled the swell. So picture the sea is calming down. It's completely silent now. The crew were on their feet briskly to furl the sail and stow it. Then, each in place, they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. So the men start rowing because there's no wind for the sail anymore. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them in my hands until they softened. No long task, for a burning heat came down from Helios, lord of the high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick on their ears. Then they tied me up, then, plump amidships, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. Soon, as we came smartly within hailing distance, the two sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang. Their lovely voices and ardor appealing over the water made me crave to listen, and I tried to say, "Untie me!" to the crews, jerking my brows, but they bent steady to the oars. Then Perimedes got to his feet, he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So, at this point, I want you to picture that Odysseus is thrashing. He's begging, "Untie me, men, untie me," because he wants to go towards the sirens. But the men are not giving in. They're just tying him more, making sure he stays on this boat and doesn't try to kill himself, basically. So, all rowed on until the sirens dropped under the sea rim and their singing dwindled away. So, first step, done. No one's dead. Sirens didn't kill anyone, so they made it past that first monster. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that was laid thick on their ears, then set me free. But scarcely had that island faded in blue air when I saw smoke and white water, so we're getting close to Charybdis and Scylla now. With the sound of waves and tumultuous the sound the men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands, the blades went knocking wild alongside till the ship lost way. With no oar blades to drive her through the water. So, what's happening is the men start freaking out because they hear these sounds, they see this smoke, so they drop their oars, they're screaming, and so now Odysseus has to kind of pull them together so that they keep going. Well, I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart into them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, "Friends, have we never been in danger before this? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops penned us in his cave? What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way out for us?" So, one thing I want us to consider here, he's giving his men a pep talk. Think of this like a coach to a team, a football team, saying, "Guys, we got to do this." But what Odysseus does is he doesn't say, "You guys can do this. You guys are super smart." He says, "I'm super smart. I'm like fantastic. And you should put all of your faith in me because I'm going to get you out of this." Again, kind of showing how he's a little cocky, kind of a little bit full of himself. "Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall be something that we will remember." Remember meaning they're able to get past it, survive, so they can remember it. "Heads up, lads. We must obey the orders as I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands and lie back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus help us pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for that headland. Watch the drift, or we fetch up on the smother and you drown us." That was all, and it brought them round to action. So he gives them these kind of jobs they all need to do, and they go, "Okay," and they get back to work. They would have dropped their oars again in panic to roll for cover under the decking. Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied on my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made my way along to the foredeck, thinking to see her first from there, the monster of the gray rock, again talking about Scylla here, harboring torment for my friends. I strained my eyes upon that cliffside veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time, in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the straight Scylla to port, and on our starboard beam Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron seething over intense fire, when the mixture suddenly heaves and rises. The shot spume soared to landside heights and fell like rain. But when she swallowed the seawater down, we saw the funnel of the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and dark sand raged on the bottom far below. So, I want you to consider this image of Charybdis here. Sometimes this image on the left here has her coming out of the water. The one on the right just has her under the water. But that's what like the razor sharp teeth look like as she is sucking down everything. So Charybdis does this. The men are watching this happen, but they are not close because they decided to go the Scylla side of the little narrow strait. So they did not mess with Charybdis. So Charybdis didn't kill anyone. She just spews up the water and sucks it back down. So the men are just watching it happen. My men all blanched against the gloom. Our eyes were fixed upon that yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. Then Scylla made her strike, whisking 6 of my best men from the ship. So, basically what's happening here is it looks like Scylla and Charybdis are working together. Charybdis distracts the men by spewing up the water and sucking it down. All the men are looking at them. All the meanwhile, Scylla's up in her cave going like, "I'm waiting. I'm waiting. And then Sheldon goes, boom, grabs 6 of the men, yeets them off the ship, and devours them. So they're kind of working together there, Charybdis being the distraction, Scylla being the one who is taking 6 of these men. I happened to glance aft at ship and oarsmen and caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Picture this image. We have Scylla's 6 heads all holding men, and their legs are like flailing because they're being killed. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. A man surf casting on point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker and the bait far out, will hook a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle wriggling through the air. So that's a metaphor right there, comparing this Scylla whisking 6 of these men to a fisherman casting a line and then bringing the fish up. She's basically like fishing for men. So these were borne aloft in spasms toward the cliff. She ate them as they shrieked there in her den, in her dire grapple, reaching still for me, and deathly pity ran me through at that sight, far the worst I ever suffered, questing the passes of the strange sea. So Odysseus hears his men screaming in in her cave as she's eating these men. So they don't have a very easy death. It's a lingering death. It's a long death. But what Odysseus feels is not sadness. He doesn't blame himself. He just feels pity, which is a weird thing to feel if your friends get murdered by a monster, basically because you didn't really give them a choice, because you didn't warn them about it. So Scylla is devouring these men in her cave because Odysseus didn't warn them. And now he feels some pity. He's like, that sucks for them. We rode on. Those 3 words right there. 6 of his men just died. They still continued going. They're like, okay, gotta leave him behind now. The rocks were now behind, Charybdis too, and Scylla dropped astern. Then we were coasting the noble island of the god, where grazed those cattle with wide brows and bounteous flocks of Helios, lord of the noon, who rides high heaven. From the black ship, far still at sea, I heard the lowing of the cattle winding home, and sheep's bleating, and heard too in my heart the words of blind Tiresias and Circe. Both forbade me the island of the world's delight, the sun. So basically, they leave Scylla and Charybdis, and they move on. Suddenly there's Thrinacia, cattle of the sun god are on there, and then we're going to see in our next class, our next video, him and his men actually deal with the cattle themselves that are on this island. I did get to show you the visual really quick for what some people think Scylla might look like of these heads. I think this one on the right is pretty creepy because they actually have like a body and then the heads. That's a weird image. And then this one with the tentacles in the water, the number 12 legs, and then the 6 heads. So those are just some representations of what Scylla might look like. Okay. So in tomorrow's class, we will head to Thrinacia to talk about cattle of the sun god. At this point, we can see where Odysseus has went on his journey. We've seen him go from 1 to 2 to Lotus Eaters to Land of the Cyclops to Aeolus right here, all the way up to the Laestrygonians, and then to Circe's Island, up to the Land of the Dead, back to Circe's Island, and then all the way to the Sirens, through Scylla and Charybdis, and then we're going to see him on Thrinacia with cattle of the sun god. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on Google Classroom, on Remind, or on Instagram. Please let me know if you have any concerns about this part of the story. Some of this might get a little confusing, so please ask any questions. Other than that, thanks, guys. Make sure you do your work for today.